right, everyone, we're going to cover a bunch of different things, and I do have sweet little slides. Caroline might bounce around. If you've got questions throughout, totally fine for you to pop them in. We will address them. Ultimately, we want this to be really helpful for everybody here. So with that, we'll do quick little intros. Errol, if you don't mind, I'll go first. I'm Jenny Gartuan, the CEO of Go Nimbly. A little bit about my career and what took me here. I started off as a marketing automation consultant and got really deep into Eloqua and Marketo in that space. And I quickly realized that whatever I did in one system or one team was affecting, sales or sales handoff or Salesforce or another system. And I got very obsessed with why these two teams that seemingly had the same goal, like sales and marketing, had so much friction between them. And why weren't we mad at finance? Like, why are we mad at each other? Why aren't we mad at the people that are impeding, our progress or have different goals? And so I pivoted my career from a focus on marketing automation to looking at the entire funnel. And that's when we started Go Nimbly. Our original tagline before there was a concept of RevOps was unifying the business stack. And we really talked about silos getting in the way of that customer experience and the fact that we have a lot of siloed teams and folks that are worried about their particular unit or their particular team. And that's actually impeding you from doing the big stuff and making true impact. With all that, I do more than operations. I also really love improv. So do a lot of comedy and go to a lot of comedy shows. And I make board games, like true physical board games, which is like such a mind fuck when you're like operating multi-million-dollar businesses and then trying to sell a $25 game. I've made a lot of mistakes. At one point, the people that we made the game with said it was the most expensive card game that anyone had ever made. And I was like, that's not good. That's bad margins, because 10 cents at a time feels a lot different than the space that we plan, but it's very fun to kind of see both. Errol, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah. By the way, I really enjoyed learning that about you. For people who don't know,
Thanks.
Jen and I have been like kind of going back and forth on LinkedIn for a year. So
Yeah.
I'm like really enjoying learning about her through this whole thing.
No.
So like how I ended up here, I started off my career actually working on the product engineering side of things. I just got lucky with the startup that I joined, and I went into Google, and then I started my own company, and just through accidents kind of ended up in the sales ops space. And most of like what I write about and what I do and what I work on are projects kind of in the ops space. My sort of interest and passion around the subject matter basically just came from the observation that, I spent like 5 to 7 years in product and engineering, which went through this like transformation that I describe as like, think about Office Space, the movie, and how people used to think about engineers and like, those type, builders back in the 90s, and compare them to like how suddenly they became cool and relevant and sort of like front office. In my head, as I like immersed myself in the ops world, I was like, shit, it's like the same thing is happening in front of people's eyes in these debates. I've like seen them and lived them before, and there's so much potential. It's so exciting. So I just started writing about it on LinkedIn year and a half or so ago, and I've just gotten involved in more and more communities. Where do I spend my time now? I actually run a few different companies. I guess like my interests are diversified, like Jen. So they put over here, some of the topics that we're talking about today will be tactical, some are more strategic. So I started customer-led GTM.com just a couple of weeks ago to pump out a lot of content and do consulting on some of the more strategic side of this. So this is, I guess, the debut. I haven't told anybody about it till now. And I'm excited to jump right in and see where the conversation takes us.
Love that. Well, really good transition, because you're talking about, what you saw in the days of engineering and how that's changed. Or I've actually told a similar story with IT, right? That when we were consolidating and centralizing IT, like they went through a big transition of essentially having to fight this idea that they were slow and cumbersome and like all this pain that has already also happened, and also conversations that we have around revenue operations. So it's interesting that a lot of teams see this, and it is kind of the message here that we can learn from these other teams. But ultimately, just a little bit of what I've been hearing over the past couple of months is, Go Nimbly has been talking about the RevOps message for, I think, almost 5 years. And for a long time, we were just trying to explain what it was. And we were staying a little bit in that space of like, what is RevOps? Like, What do you need to know about it? And then moved into like the why conversation, which is somewhat of where we're at. It's like why to like how, I think is where like the messaging in the spaces. And that does mean that it's gone up market, and the like C-level executives and larger companies are talking about revenue operations and the expectations, all the things that we've been talking about. We've been wanting to be the strategic force. We've been wanting to have a seat at the table. Well, they're listening and they're saying, okay, well, step up. And I think that now the expectations of this team have also really risen, and we have a little bit of friction in this process where the why has become a little bit more obvious, and people are really latching on to it. But a lot of teams don't know how to step up to that new expectation. Curious on your thought process there too, Errol, like what you're hearing and what you're seeing in the market.
Yeah, like the analogy that I like to give on this is just go back like 15 years and think about the word cloud, right? All of a sudden people were like, there were new companies coming out and saying we're a cloud native company, and then all the old
Mm-hmm.
companies were like, we're becoming a cloud company. And so, what does it mean to be a cloud company was kind of like the debate. Everybody's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I am that too. I think the difference was, for the old companies, cloud meant a deployment method, which is like you used to run this on prem.
Sure.
Now it runs in the cloud, but the support model is the same. The license model, like everything's kind of maybe it's like a little bit different, but the way we run our business is the same. And the cloud people were like, dude, the way you build software
Totally different.
is the same. The planning cycle, the waterfall, like the cloud generation is about not software excellence as we ship perfect software that works because like it's CD-ROM great. It's more like we ship software and break stuff, but we can fix it really quickly and build the best final product. So I think with RevOps, it's like the same thing where everybody's talking about it because I think RevOps kind of correlates or equates to efficiency, and that's why it's the
Sure.
hype. But I think that there's this like subtext of there are companies that are building themselves in a way that looks nothing like the companies that now have a RevOps department, and they're pulling away. And I don't think people see it today. Like in what was happening in 2003 and 2010 looks like obvious. And I think probably in
Mm,
2028, there will be like this aha moment where everybody will feel like the average RevOps department today is almost like the way I would view Dell or Oracle or something like that.
mm,
So I think that there's this like everybody's not talking about the same thing, but there is innovation happening. And I think one goal of mine in just like being here today and talking to people is always just like opening that lens to just thinking about that word as a movement, as a concept more than a department. So that's just like
totally.
my observation.
Yeah, I hear you. A lot of companies will come to me that are really early in this journey. They've just heard, maybe even from a board director or someone, hey, we need RevOps. And it's like, okay, let's go do it. But they aren't really that educated. And the fixation is on an org chart. And it's like, great, I need to hire differently, or I need to like move people's roles and have them have a different manager and have this roll up to a different person. But ultimately, it's like, how often do you make decisions based on looking at an org chart? Like how often are you like reviewing that in order to do your work? And it's not an org chart, it's not like a
And
biofunction, it's like the way we work.
my observation, for what it's worth, is I think like a lot of people look at this in kind of like again, it's RevOps as a concept is so logical and obvious. If you say three departments don't talk to each other, if they
Right.
work together and they're not siloed, no silo is better than siloed. That's obvious and we need it. It has almost never been my experience that the problem is that they're not talking to each other
Right.
or working together. They get in rooms. In fact, I would say they talk at each other endlessly.
Sure.
And what's missing is something more fundamental. Again, this like philosophy and way of operating. And that's where I think there's this disconnect in, reading what the experts are writing, sort of people who say they have 20 years of RevOps experience, even though this has existed only 3 years.
Right.
And what some of these like really innovative people who don't even know the old playbook are doing like in their day to day.
That's interesting. Okay, for the sake of moving, let's talk about if what we really want is this function and this team and you, actually, it's like even taken away what it means to be a team or a department within a company, but anybody here, it's how are you able to elevate that role to do the things that the revenue operations promises. We overuse the word strategic, so you'll hear me say it, and I am also wincing as I say it, but it's hard to describe it in any other way. But like having that seat at the table, being the person that elevates things that are truly going to change the way that your business works, that are going to increase LTV, that are going to increase carry capacity in all your team, that are going to scale you to the next inflection point. And in order to do that kind of work, like the big thing is, are you like the definition of strategic is that you're aligned to the strategic goals of the business or what the CEO cares about. And so I think that's a thing that I would want everybody to be thinking about here is the work that you're pushing, is the work that your team or if you're a team of one that you're aligned with, is that what C-level is talking about? Is that aligned to the next inflection point for your business? Because if it's not, then of course you're not getting invited to meetings. Of course you're not influencing the roadmap because they don't care about the work that you're doing. What do you think, Daryl?
Yeah, I agree. Like a good example I think of this is you talked about like IT. So the IT was the monolith, right? And today
Right.
it's broken into software engineering and IT. IT is like the group of people who work on laptops and provisioning and all that. And then the people who are customer facing are called the engineering team, right? And that's where all the salary and prestige is. So like I think the way to kind of think about this is you know, to add to what you're saying, you know, the C level is going to be taught. You're obviously going to be working on something that the C level is talking about. Otherwise, like you wouldn't have a job. Like
Sure.
we need to make sales more efficient. We need them to run the numbers. I think you could say the same thing though. The lens I would apply is like IT. Like if IT, if the way laptops are provisioned, the way that people work, the way they're enabled is actually going to be the reason you defeat your competitors in the marketplace,
Sure.
then that is like very, very strategic. But for a lot of people, it's like if you're working on stuff that's like that's just like the bare minimum requirement. Like we all know that. The real question is like, how are we going to go kick competitor ABC's butt? That's a really like that's what CEOs tend to think about. And so if you can't map it to that question of how do we kick, like again, we're 10% faster in contracting, and happiness on contracting is up by 50% in a survey we gave. Those are great things and they do help the business, but the question is contracting the reason that you're going to beat Amazon?
Right.
If it's not, then that's that's like a really easy sort of like decision framework.
Yeah, I love that. I've actually said before that there's a lot of story. I have this like as a point on here that like storytelling is really important. The work that you do may be the same at like maybe three different companies are doing the same kind of work, and the way that it gets to you is like not that important. But if contracting is a great example, it's you're doing that work, but if you can elevate it and saying, hey, we were losing 30% of our opportunities at negotiation stage. And when we look at that, we know that it took us 3 days to quote. The customer was getting the quote last out of everybody else. And so they were comparing us to the first one by making that contracting process 50% faster and, yada, yada. And here's all the great metrics. We're actually seeing an increase in conversion now by 10% more. Like the problem is still the same that you were solving as anybody else, which is like, yes, I just made it more streamlined for the rep. That's what I did. I made his job easier. But the only reason I prioritized that was because I was having a problem in my pipeline or because the customer was feeling that pain. Otherwise, I wouldn't have prioritized it.
We
Yeah,
do.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, we have a question from the audience. I just want to jump in really quickly to see if we're on track to answer the scope and kind of roles, or if we want to take a moment and answer that question now.
The one from Brittany here, because I actually really like her comment.
There is one in the Q&A. I struggle with defining the roles on my team. Okay. Everyone has a different point of view on how RevOps should support the organization, and it just becomes a dumping ground of work. How do you structure roles within an ops team?
Taylor, you want to take a first shot, or do you want me to?
Yeah. So like, I guess my version of this is if it's not clear what RevOps is, like you're kind of in a hopeless situation. Like, I think that's what happens when your role is not defined. It becomes a dumping ground. Like that's exactly what happens when it's not there. So I think this is like, maybe we'll get to this at the end, but I would say that there is a functional skill set in product management that can help with this, where, you know, you can go through the process. And RevOps, I actually run a RevOps co-op course on this, where I help people basically go from where they are in that feeling to talking to people, to kind of pulling themselves out of that rut to create that definition. That actually, you know, that's one way to solve the problem. The ideal way to solve the problem is to just go work at a company where there's like a vision and a clear mandate.
It's easier.
Those are two ways to solve that problem. But I think it's like, I would not minimize that problem, because it's a very difficult, like, it takes a lot of skill to go from a department that has no central purpose, identity, whatever, into something. And I think yeah, like, I think it's solvable, but I don't think that there's a quick fix that we can tell you on this call that would fix that. But the RevOps co-op class, I think what I've heard from a lot of people is that that is exactly the problem that it's solved for them. So worth maybe taking a look at that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I would say if I were to take the angle of, hey, you're really committed and you want to go in there and you want to restructure the team, and that's what you think is really great for your career, is to figure this out and figure out how to change the company. Super hard, to Errol's point. We've been hired to do that, and it's still really hard with a bunch of consultants trying to change the minds of leadership if they're really not bought in. It's close to impossible. But I would say, I would come in and try to figure out what the problem is here for you. Like, you're saying that you're getting a dumping ground of work. Can you take that work? First of all, do you have a really strong intake process so that you can prove that you're a dumping ground for work? Like, can you pull up everything that you've been asked to work on? Can you, pull up everything that you've gotten done? A lot of people struggle even with that point. But there's two categories of work. There's the kind of the business as usual, like keep the lights on, like really important work that runs your business. Figure out how to make that smaller, figure out how to automate it, all that good stuff. And then on the other side, there's innovation, new features, things of the work that has to get like you want to do and that will change the company. And identifying and figuring out how to prioritize that and saying no to the rest of it. You need buy-in to do that. You need to be really aligned on the innovation work and have a lot of visibility on that business as usual work, so that your company knows that, hey, it takes $300,000 to run this business. It takes 2.5 people to do XYZ, so that you have space to do the other work.
One thing I want to just like add is, I think like the fact that people in ops have to do this is such an unreasonable job and expectation. Like,
yeah,
like, what does it mean that you have to, like, because the thing that we're teaching people ultimately in the product management sort of methodology, customer interview method, like getting people from A to B psychologically, it's like, the truth is you're actually doing the work that your bosses and their bosses' bosses should be doing, which
sure.
means like it's actually a very powerful skill to have, and it's useful in every company. And unfortunately, that's the way the world works. But I think like it's important to understand like the situation that you're in. If you start with like, well, I'm not good at communicate, because people will tell you stuff like that. They'll tell you,
right,
you're not being clear, it's all about trade-offs. They'll give you this stuff and make it your problem. And I think where you have to start from is like by saying, I am in a problem that I did not create. And the root cause of that problem is a lack of strategy and alignment that starts all the way at the top. Because I'll tell you this, like, I've been a bad leader, I've been a good leader, I've worked on all types of teams where I've seen this. And like this alignment thing that everybody talks about is not a problem on teams that have a clear strategy. Because you say, this is what we need to do. This is my skill. This is your skill. It's pretty obvious what we need to do. Like, we don't need to talk about this. And you just go do it. And when that's not there, what I find is that they're like just, ops is just stuck there. And everybody's like, well, you need to get better at prioritizing or communicating or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with you. Start by just like recognizes this isn't a problem you created. And it's a problem you can solve. But it's like, you to solve it, you have to do something that your colleagues probably don't know how to do, and they don't, they don't understand the burden that they're putting on you by giving this like mandate.
So yeah, no other team in the organization has to go prove like why marketing exists and like do a bunch of work within a quarter to try to like elevate that message instead of do the work that they want to be doing and have the skills for. So it's quite a predicament that we don't see any other team needing to like justify their existence. So,
Lindsay asked another question that's just like squarely in line
Sure.
with this talk. If RevOps is becoming the fastest growing job in the US, why do you think leadership still struggles properly defining and empowering this role? Clearly, leadership understands the need, so the disconnect seems confusing.
I don't think they understand the need at all. I mean, I think it's like, oh, everybody has it. Like, how many AI jobs have been created in the last 6 months? And who the hell knows what AI is and what it's going to mean for their business and where it's going to take them? Right? Like, that's what I mean. In the marketplace, RevOps is tied to efficiency, and efficiency is the topic of the day. And so, like, that's all that leadership knows. Yesterday I commented on a post on LinkedIn where I basically said, look, if you're trying to run the SDR playbook today that you were doing a year and a half ago, it's literally like trying to run the same real estate playbook at 3% interest rates. Like, it's not more difficult to run the playbook. It's impossible. Like, that world doesn't exist. And somebody actually responded to me and said, like, senior person at a company, and said, well, what should we do? And I was like, that's like, I thought that's why you get paid to answer that question, right? So, like, I would not overestimate that people actually have a single clue of what they're doing at the leadership level. More often than not, they don't. And the simplest evidence, I think, is funny. This is turning into like like relationship advice radio, but it's like, but really, like, the fact that if you feel like there's no direction, whatever, pretty good indication that your bosses do not have any idea what they're doing. And it's not their fault. That's just like the way the world works. But I think if you do not internalize the what is actually happening, then you're going to sit there and work and try everything that they're telling you, and it's just not going to work because you're trying to solve the wrong problem.
Yeah, I hear you on that. You mentioned the example of AI. I have another one that's like still happening. The amount of times that people ask for a marketing attribution, like, solution, right? And they want all these things because, quite frankly, they've heard that it's important. It's like everyone has this. As a marketer, I need it all, it's like best practice. But then the amount of times that we've built it and no decisions have ever been made, no one's actually changed their investment strategy for their marketing. It's sometimes used on a deck to maybe justify a little bit of like spend, and ultimately has little to no value for most people, for most companies. And but it's still being asked for. So again, we may not be able to trust that even though people are asking for certain things, that they really understand why or what they're going to do with that information. So RevOps is getting this hype. People are seeing metrics like companies with RevOps do better in the market. Companies with RevOps have more trust in their data. And so they're seeing that kind of correlation. They're going, great, let's get RevOps, without any understanding of how to structure that team, how to elevate them, how to, give authority and all of that. So yeah, +1 to definitely maybe not correlated, maybe correlated, but not, we can't just assume that they understand. I'm gonna move us on and just do a quick little quiz for everyone that is probably just gonna double down on the points that we just made. If you have your little phones, you can just use the QR code. I am also just going to put the link right in the chat if it's easier for you. And it's just gonna be a slew of questions. Maybe it will frustrate you a bit because they're probably gonna feel very real. I'll put on a quick little song and you can go through it. Just rate for yourself their I statements. Just rate them for how true they are from 0 to 10 for you. And I'm going to put on a quick little song and we will wait a minute on that. I just went to see Matt and Kim in concert, so it's going to be putting us back in the early mid-2000s. And they're rad in concerts, so if you haven't seen them, by all means, go.
Dude,
all right, I've got 13.
Music, dude.
Yeah? Well, do you listen to LCD Sound System?
I mean, that's pretty old school, but yeah.
They're playing right by my house in a month, so come over to New York.
We're showing our age a little bit.
I'm actually really sad about that. What do you mean we're not cool? What happened? I was rad at one point.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm going through all this, like, You know, like like I'm becoming my father, kind of like you say something and you're like, oh my, what did I just say? I feel like I experience
100%.
that every 5 days. So.
All right, everybody's pretty fast. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Yeah, I'm definitely having moments where I'm just like, I had my headshots done and I looked at them and I was like, oh my God, I look just like my mom. Like in all the pictures, I'm like, damn, really seeing it. Okay, I'm gonna go through these pretty quickly, but I'm already starting to see some trends that I think we can all feel. If nothing more, we can feel seen. Okay, so I spend most of my days firefighting on reactive work. Like, you know, we're coming in at a 7.5, so very real for all of us. Very few of us feel like it's pretty small. If you're in this bottom area, congratulations. That's such a beautiful place to be where you can do really meaningful, deep work and you're not pulled into reactive all the time. So happy for you. I manage my work in different channels and have no visibility. Oh, this one. Oh, did I only activate one question? Okay, give me 1 sec. You're all gonna do one more. I only gave you access to one question. All right. Let's do, okay. If you can all go back there and press the next one. I was like, you guys were fast. And now I know it's because I only gave you one question. All right, we're seeing them live. Okay, manage my work in different channels. Keep it up and I'll just do them real quick and we'll kind of at the 15-person mark, move it along. All right, this one's got some dichotomy where we've got some people on the high end and some people on the low end. So some of you are really nailing it. That's lovely. All right, we hit 18. I'm going to go to the next one and activate it. All right, next question for you all. I have no future roadmap and I don't know what I'm building next month, next quarter, or next year. So highlighting the
By
fact
the way,
that
we can talk if we have time to talk about it. I would actually say that's not a bad thing.
Oh, okay, tell me. Go on.
Like
we'll let people put it in.
Fun topic. Well, I mean, this is one of those things where we talk about this in the course. And I like basically my experience with road mapping is I sit down and ask people, how much time do you spend curating your roadmap? Like how much time do you sit there like sorting and doing this? And then what percentage of stuff on a roadmap ever gets built?
Right.
And that's just like the waste. And like we talk about in the course, like so much of the product management discipline, the way that people think of it is like, my goal is to make people like, my goal is to take all this mess and then invent a mathematical model to prove to people that we are doing things in a scientific way. And like just the amount of work that goes into saying like create a Jira ticket and do that. So like basically what we teach in the course is like, if you're doing it right, people will not want to create a Jira ticket. And I'll give you an example of it, right? So like somebody comes to you and says, hey, I have this problem. Like we have this feature request, right? And there would be a conversational technique there where you would say, okay, like walk me through that. You do a little bit of the root cause thing. But at the very end, you say, okay, given that, you know, Beth wants us to work on A and the CEO cares about whatever, how do you like, do you feel like this is going to move any of those things? And if you're doing the product management right, 90% of the time people should say no. Sure. And then they'll let it go and they'll never come. And you know, how often do people come back with the same need twice? Almost never. And so, you know, what I tell people is like, the goal is not to have an efficient backlog or comprehensive backlog. The goal is to have a teeny weeny tiny backlog that you don't need to manage, and then everything kind of works itself out. But that's something we talk about in the course and that people seem to like a lot. Yeah, I hear you on that. We get asked a lot to create roadmaps, and a lot of the time we just say, why don't we just focus on what we're working on today and like soon after, so that people have like, we can go back and say, hey, we're working on these things. You have a new priority. Do any of these get removed? So it's almost the tool for you to be able to say no, and a tool for you to create like if nothing more, visibility into the work that your team does, as opposed to kind of the planning over years. The only time when I feel like it's important to do some of this, and it may not, roadmap might be the wrong tool, but it's planning, like what are the operational projects that are so necessary for your business to get to that next inflection point that you know are coming,
and to make sure that you're planning and getting budget for those. Because if you're telling me you're IPOing next year, well, I better have my revenue data super, super clean,
Totally agree with
or I'm
that.
going to get, it's like, I need to put that somewhere, and it's big. So it's like, if you don't know that inflection point and you're not aligned to like where your business is going next, or what your biggest gap is, or that a new product release or whatever it is, like there's these things that have to happen, and put those on, everything else is going to change. And also, if you're putting like 4-hour projects, like a new field and whatever you're just like, you're doing more work than it takes to just get it done.
And once again, this is the strategy thing, right? This requires, like what you just said is, oh, the plan is in 18 months to IPO.
Yeah.
And like, what are the things that's required? Now, one small, teeny tiny story I'll share is I remember speaking to an SVP at a public company, and the company, like public companies, like, it's worth like many, many billions, and it's doing fine, but it's not like a break, it's like kind of yesteryear's company. Like the market's, it's like, it'll never be this phenomenal thing. And so this person was divulging to me, I wish my CEO would just tell me if we're going to get bought by a private equity firm, because like my job would be so obvious in terms of what we're going to do, but we're like hedging ourselves and we're preparing for both. So I just like share that. And again, because it's like, if you don't have your roadmap or your true north, that may also not be your problem. And what I found is that, CEOs tend to be very squirrely around these things, and they try to create as much option value so as to not appear to have gotten anything wrong or to have confused people. So there's just like many things that I think get in the way of this, sadly.
Yeah, I hear that. Okay, I messed up this Slido so that I don't want to go through each one individually. So instead, I'm just going to tell you what the statements were, and you can do it in your own head. So you have no authority to influence prioritization. So how much authority do you have there? An ability to say no. I think that's a pretty huge reason why we end up in that firefighting space that we talked about in number one. Having a lot of tech debt that's holding you back in innovation. So if you are about to deploy something and you are so overwhelmed and scared, and it takes forever to make any change in your platform, it's going to be really hard to push anything big. Not having a relationship with either your user or the customer. Users are a little easier. I saw a comment in the chat earlier about that relationship with the sales team, and how you manage. I mean, I think it was. I'm gonna read it out loud because I think it was. Oh my gosh, you guys commented a lot. Okay. I think it was Camilla. Okay, so Brittany, you said with it being so connected to teams that are individually contributing sales, it's a struggle to talk about direct ROI impact to the RevOps team and individual team. And I think that's like one of the things that I struggled with, and I changed my mind about, which is like, you've got your users, you've got your go-to-market team, the people that are within your company, and then you've got your customers, and you have to balance those two things out, because you're ultimately trying to build a really great platform, for lack of a better word, for your go-to-market teams. But ultimately, you're doing that for the customer, for your ultimate customer. So how do you balance those two things? Not knowing if you have the right people on your team and your team burning out. These are all typical things that keep us in that very reactive firefighting space. So looking at time and doing a little bit of speed through these things, because we're getting amped up and talking about a lot of things. Ultimately, anybody in this room, like many of you, can become the next CRO. Like that's really the opportunity that you have. Folks with the skill sets that we're all building, with an ability to run, the backbone operationally of your go-to-market teams. That's a huge skill set that people are looking for in their next CRO. We've all heard it's the biggest growing opportunity. Head of revenue operations was the biggest role. I think this was like about a year old that LinkedIn posted this. And, I just did a quick search for revenue operations, 1,800 open roles within LinkedIn. So like, it's hot. You, to Errol's point, align yourself with a company that truly does believe this, so you can build these skill sets, because you're best set up to be that next CRO. I know you're passionate about this, Errol, so do you want to sprinkle anything in?
Well, maybe just a tip. So like, be very critical of people who have like an already existing like sales process and whatever, and are like now starting to think about revenue operations. It's a bit like getting into a relationship with somebody who, like, somebody else has done a lot of psychological damage. And so like, you have to solve the last few relationships problems and your current problems. I've seen so much of that in the market. I think people, just again, I've started several companies. Some have done better than others. And I can tell you, like, when I hear people talk about these interviews they're doing with CEOs, like, there's a lot of companies doing 10, 15, 20 million in revenue that are effed. They're just totally stuck. Like, they've built the company and the product and the thing in a way where it is like 6 jobs trying to fix that. So I would just say, look for the gems where they're saying, you know what, we're trying to do this thing differently, not to say, oh, we value efficiency and we're looking for somebody to come in and own it. Like that, I would be so gone if I heard that this day and age. Like it's a big trap.
Yeah, for sure. And you all joined here because we talked about, hey, what does it mean to build a go-to-market engine? What does it mean to think as a revenue operator? And if any of you have read the book Steal Like an Artist, I think this is sort of the inspiration. Is Errol even mentioned, right? Like we're talking about a handful of years that revenue operators and even having the term. And what we don't want to do is try to recreate the wheel, try to relearn how to create teams, how to prioritize, how to do all these things that these other teams have done really well. You can steal from engineering teams, you can steal from product teams and learn about the things that they've already figured out. Otherwise, quite frankly, they're going to take over the things that we want to do because they're just ahead of us. Product teams know how to prioritize the customer pains. They know how to say no. They know how to create alignment. They are very aligned with the CEO and leadership. And we got to be really careful, especially in where we are right now, where like the customer and expansions and things we should have been worried about forever, but we weren't, are starting to become more and more important. We need to learn from these teams and adhere and grab the things that they're really great at. Thoughts on that, Errol?
Completely agree. Nothing to add.
Cool.
We do have a quick question from the audience. Thomas asks, what's the difference between a CRO and CCO?
Well, I guess it depends on the company that you're talking to. CROs at every single company are different. Some of them are head of sales, some of them are more operational. You could also throw in a COO and say, like, what has each of them been tasked with. For me, like the different, like chief customer officers I'm seeing are typically more on the marketing side than operational. So like that's an adherence and a difference. But it's going to be company specific. Errol, any thoughts on that one?
Nothing short. I mean, I just think that these like 99% of these titles increasingly feel made up. CRO
Sure.
just seems to be a VP of sales that wants to be told that he or she's not going to be marginalized into a little silo. So like the product management discipline would tell you, like, what is the job? Like, look, there's this concept called job to be done. What is the job to be done for the department? So like, what is the job to be done for the CRO? That's how I would evaluate what the person actually does. In theory, what it's supposed to do is to, strategically unify all these go-to-market teams. But frankly, that's also what the CEO does, like, or is supposed to do. So I increasingly, I think what that title means seems to be getting diluted. It used to mean here's a salesperson who actually understands marketing and could also probably be a CMO or a CMO light. And I, as the COO, am completely delegating my problems involving go-to-market to this person. That's what it used to mean. Today, it seems to be the person who hires the RevOps person.
Sure. And we are like, look, my experience working with CROs is, to Erin's point, she posted in here that they're acting as new business sales leaders specifically. Like you certainly see a huge focus on sales and sales productivity and sales process in these CROs, because to Errol's point, they're really glorified VP of sales. And that is one of the realities. I don't know that that's completely I would say almost all CROs that I work with have more of a sales background than a marketing background and are more focused on it. I'm not saying that's good, but I'm saying it is a reality. And let's see what kind of team that they build, that they can surround themselves by people that can elevate that.
And to be clear, if you do come across a CRO as a real CRO, like, it should be almost like you're visiting, like when I meet those types of people, I'm just like in awe. I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, I feel like I met, some famous person. I'm like, please talk more. Like, I want more words to come out of your mouth so that I can learn from you. Like, they're so rare, those people who can do those things. So like, that's another way to know, like, is this a CRO or is this like not like a true CRO? Is like first of all, they're unicorns, so probably they're not.
Sure.
But if they are, I mean, you'll just be like, I've never heard a sales leader talk like you. And then you'll be like, I've never heard a CMO talk like you. You're just completely different animal.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay, so looking at that theory, it's like, what if we thought of ourselves as product managers? I'm going to quickly just flash. I won't quiz everyone because I know we've got 15 minutes, but I'm going to flash a couple of statements. If you want to put it in the chat, I'll put all 5 up and see if any of you can guess what these are. But again, if we're building a go-to-market engine, if we're building the product that all of our go-to-market teams use, and that's technology, enablement, process, everything that they're going to do in their day-to-day, what would we say that we're doing? Like, what's the outcome? And the truth is, most product companies, they're not saying like, I have a bunch of features, here they are. They're talking about the outcome. And so it's like, how are we aligning ourselves to the outcome that our team or job to be done, for Errol's language, that this team is supposed to be doing? So I don't know if anybody's going to recognize some of these, but these are products that you're all probably using and what they say they do. So we've got find and convert leads. One video is worth 1,000 words. You've got unlock power of customer experiences, optimize agreement workflow, maximize revenue, your workday, your way, fastest email experience ever made. So all of these are what that product is saying that they're doing, right? What the outcome of all of their work is. And for anybody that was guessing at home, Errol, do you have any of these that you know?
I
You're
think
stumped by
fastest
all of
email
them?
experience. I think fastest email is that Superhuman.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
All right, 10 points. The first, top left going kind of down is yellow is Apollo. So find and convert the perfect leads. They're not saying buy data. They're not telling you, anything other than the outcome here. One video worth 1,000 words is Loom. So it's like supercharge your productivity. Unlock power of customer experience is Zendesk. Top right, maximize revenue is PandaDoc, and then your workday, your way is Clockwise productivity calendaring app. So the big idea here is just make sure that when you're talking and aligning your team to what you're doing and why you exist, it's not to deploy changes. It's not specific features, but it's maybe some of these statements, and they can be slightly different for you. There's this big like North Star's revenue, and it has to be the same. But there's a lot of things that you're doing. You might be supercharging your go-to-market team to close bigger deals faster. You might be getting to the next inflection point with confidence. Like it might be around, hey, we're going to IPO in the next year. It might be delighting your customers with a seamless experience, like throughout lead to renewal. And these can change, and they can change as your team is like, you might be in a scale period of your company. You might be at a time period where we have a big inflection point, and the work I'm doing is internal. It is like tech debt work, and but it's only good if the outcome, justifies that. Or you might be at a place pretty early where it's all about the customer experience and getting that in a really great place. Or it might be like, hey, we're tripling the size of our sales team in the next 6 months. Cool, I got to go like enable that productivity. All of these are good things. And I think that one of the things that I'm passionate about, and I was part of the problem, is this idea that like when you're building that charter, to use kind of the language in the chat, it's not, I can't copy paste mine and give it to you. I can't tell you this is like the RevOps charter and good luck and go push it, because it truly depends on where you are as a business. All right. And then little story about how that's changed for me. This was a slide I used to use not even that long ago, like maybe 6 months ago. And I've done a stint within one of our customers, like truly embedded in the RevOps team. And I had a bit of an aha moment. I was like so adamant and honestly probably pretty obnoxious on my soapbox about how, I don't really care if the go-to-market team is hard, or I don't really care if an AE's job is hard. Like if it doesn't affect the customer, whatever, like it's not important. And I was really, really like adamant about the customer's the customer. Like I only care about them, and I'm really going to align with that. And I'm still passionate about that, but I've had a little bit of a reality check that like ultimately my users are the go-to-market team. And I do have to think about what makes it easy for them. not because I'm passionate about their life being easy, but because I want them to adopt my processes, because I want good data in the system, because I want them to be enabled to create that peak customer experience, but I still need to prioritize and align with the go-to-market team. And I was kind of an asshole about it. So I guess this is the first time that I'm saying that maybe I was a little bit wrong. Errol, do you have any thoughts on my confession? Oh, you're on mute.
If I'm going to lose the audience on anything I say, it'll be this. I would say you weren't a big enough asshole. And I would highly, highly suggest. So for some of you, for those of you who find anything that I've said remotely interesting, I gave a talk at OpStars, not last year, but the year before, where I actually talked about how we spent 18 months at the company bringing RevOps. And like, I didn't even know what I in my head, I thought I knew what RevOps was, but by doing it, it like really crystallized in my head. And the conclusion of that 18-month project, by the way, took us from minus $4 million burn a year to plus $1 million in profit in 18 months, just by going through this process. Oh, and coming to work no longer hurt. Like, it didn't suck. It was like, actually, I wouldn't say like fun, but I would say easy. Like, there was just like no more pain. Basically, what we learned there was that the problem of any given department, the pain, so like the pain of sales was almost always caused by another department's problem. So somebody else caused that problem. But the underlying root cause of this person's problem was another department.
Yeah.
So like the number of times, and we actually started that project from an actually very sales-centric point of view. So we actually weren't like, screw the customer. We were like, we're tired and exhausted of burning money and our life sucks. How can we not make our life suck? What we found was that all of the aspects that made our life suck ultimately did like map to something that the customer did not care about in the slightest. So what I would say is like, I don't think there's necessarily a transitive property. I would say if your sales team is unhappy, there's some root cause, not in the department, but another one. And if you go solve that, your sales team will be plenty happy. Like, trust me, like it will solve like a commission problem or incentive problem or CPQ problem or like something. So I would just say my personal experience is like, I never do that transitive property. I always try to trace it to the root cause. And then like, which one would you prefer, right? Would you rather solve sales team problem and have the customer's problem be an externality? Or would you rather solve the customer problem and have the sales team's benefit be an externality? For me, I'm just like, because the customer aligns to the CEO, that seems like a dominant strategy to me.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. It's just like, I just come from a different experience. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say you were an asshole. I admire
Thank you.
your
And I'm
vision.
not flip-flopping by any means, right? Like it's a good transition period, which is like, look, customer experience gaps are still really important. And you need to prioritize like how they want to consume your business. Is your pricing intuitive and they understand it? Do you know how to compete and why you're better than other products? And can your customers also understand that? And that's a slew of projects that you can come up with to solve some of those issues. And it's still important. I think the thing that I learned is that depending again on your inflection point and where you're going and what the goal is, some of the work that we have to do and the why, like we got to get to the root of any problem, but some of those problems might actually be under scale or efficiency, which were things that I didn't love doing. And that I felt a little bit like, I started off my career, like I talked about at Blue Wolf, for anybody that knows them, Salesforce consultancy. Very lucky to work there. I had a fabulous time, and it's the reason I was able to start my company. But a lot of what we did was productivity. It was more than 10 years ago. And we were working with really large sales teams. Like my clients were like T-Mobile and GE and like massive amounts. And we really did focus on, all right, it took the rep 16 clicks to get here. How do I get that to 3? Because saving 20 minutes across thousands of people actually was good. But at the scale now, we work with like mid-sized SaaS companies. We just don't have the economies of scale of like a 10,000 person company. And I think that what I did is I like went from one extreme to the other, which was like, I only care about the sales experience. Let's get the number of clicks down, to now being like, whatever, you make a lot of money. I don't care about your, productivity. I'm going to go the other way and only care about the customer. And it turns out that like, depending what your problem, like I'm going to keep using the word inflection point, but depending on where you're going, these things like different projects and different reasons are going to come up. So my new thing is like trying to find balance between your user and your customer, and knowing that ultimately, like it doesn't, I don't necessarily feel like I have to prioritize one or the other. I have to prioritize the gap, like the thing that I'm solving for. And that might trickle down into one of these three things.
And I think one good, so let's give an example to people. I don't know if you like, what's your
Yeah.
favorite example of whether you start customer first or rep first, but like where it's like, we solve this problem and everything just aligned. And you
Ooh.
share one, I'll share one.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot, but I'm having like a million things. Like, for example, you could solve the problem of renewals. So you could go in and say, our renewal process is clunky, our CSMs are confused. And it's like, okay, well, I could focus on the experience of the CSM, and I could do some rep rides and figure out like, okay, well, let me send you some alerts and let me give you a report and let me try to enable you. Or I could pull back and try to figure out like, okay, well, what's the actual problem here? Are our customers just surprised by renewals at the last possible second, and they have price increases that they didn't know about, and they didn't get an alert till 2 days before, and you had no idea that they were a churned customer and their product got turned off, and you were like, oops, it wasn't in Salesforce. And it's like, okay, well, now I'm getting the real thing, and I might actually flip the entire project and say, well, we're going automated renewals and let's move everybody into that space. And now I no longer have to enable my rep on that. Like, I've changed the entire problem. I've changed the entire problem space. Like, that's one that comes up a lot, is that people will come and ask for like, oh, I need automating renewal alerts. And it's like, well, do you? And like, it might end up that the answer is yes, but like, let's really get down and figure out what's actually going on.
So I'll share so along those lines, like one of the things that we hated the most was renewals, because like, and our problem was like getting somebody to sign the renewal paper and what happens if they don't. And
Right.
so then it gets into a game of like, and at the time we sold mission critical infrastructure. So like me turning you off is like a very aggressive thing to do.
Yeah.
So like that's bad customer experience. And so like part of our initial thinking was to, okay, let's do automated renewal reminders, or like another department, like finance is contacting them, because like then it's not the CSM who's being a jerk, it's somebody else. We went through every variation of this. And then going back to your artist steal concept, we were like, you know what? You know where we sign our contract every single time, right on the month? In fact, not only do we sign it, we 2 months before the contract ends, reach out to our rep and we say, can you please send me that contract? Amazon Web Services. Because Amazon Web Services, the answer was none of the things that I just mentioned. Amazon Web Services, if you don't sign a contract, you know what happens? You pay 50% more month to month. And because because you cannot like just turn off their product, they figured out how to do the product thing. Either they make money or they get a contract, or they make more money and they get a contract. So like so what we realized is, again, this goes back to part of the strategy, is like, we didn't know how many customers were really like ready to be like, you know what, actually, we prefer month to month and we're going to roll off. And so when we made that change, it required a strategic thought from the top saying, I want only good fit customers. We don't want to come in like support this type of thing. Standardization matters. When we did that, we lost some customers, but overall, our existing customer base grew their business to entirely cover that loss and make up more. And now we even have some customers who prefer to pay us 30% more per month, because it just turns out that their finance department, they've been customers paying 30% too much every year for 3 years now. But the way their finance department works, that's what they prefer.
Yeah.
And so like, that's an example to me of where like, we didn't build anything, we didn't do CPQ, we used the product management kind of like framework to get to the root cause. And by the way, like, again, we didn't even like build anything. We took away things and it solved the problem of the customer and it solved the problem of the account manager. So like, that's like my favorite example of this at its peak.
I love that.
Believe we only have 1 minute left. We do have a question I'm probably going to have y'all answer in the community, but just wanted to give you a heads up.
Yeah. All right. So we'll send the slides and there's a little bit more information on here, but I think if I could just go to our last big thing, like you're here, you're people with growth mindsets who want to learn more, who are passionate about revenue operations. Like the people on this call are the people that can step into this world that we're talking about. And we know it's not easy. It's not easy to switch and be like, look, now I'm a strategic design thinker who is going to get to the why root of every problem and do really interesting work, especially when the first question that we did on our poll was like you're firefighting and you're in it. So it's a journey, and like we're here to support you, and it's not easy, but if you're bringing focus to those skills that you're building, like get close to the customer, understand the customer experience, align with the inflection point that your company's going after so you can align your projects to what really matter. Create certainty across teams and your leadership and your executive team. Whether or not Errol talks you out of a roadmap or you want one, it doesn't matter, but like create that certainty for your team, and create a really big skill around storytelling. Sometimes the work that you know and you're passionate about, like this company needs it, might not be the sexy, like great work. Like you might have to be pitching that, hey, we have to refactor Salesforce. We can't deploy anymore. It's a mess. That can be really, really hard. A big storytelling skill set will help you prioritize those things that keep you up at night that you know you need to do that, make things hard. So I would focus on these 4 skills, and I'm hoping that, we start to see everybody here getting promoted and getting big titles and continuing this work.
Errol and Jen, thank you so much from the community for this. It was amazing. We will be sending out the recording. I think everybody's super appreciative, and I hope everyone has an excellent day. Thank you so much for attending.
And thanks, Errol. You made this really fun.
No, thank you. I'm so glad we did this. I think we're going to do more of these is the
Yay.
feeling I get. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.